All right, and welcome back to another episode of MajorGTV. Before we get started, I just want to say that I appreciate everyone, all the subscribers, all the comments, all the likes, all the views. MajorGTV is trending upwards. And let's keep it going. Let's keep it growing. Let me know, the content that you like the most, what you would like to see. But I just want to, shout out all the viewers, let you know I do appreciate you. So we're back with another episode. This week we're going to jump into some college football. The NFL has been hot, and we've been paying a lot of attention to the NFL. But I want to give college football its due. This past weekend, I actually at first I thought that there weren't any too many great games on. Of course we had Miami versus Florida, and we had Oklahoma versus Auburn. So we had some headliners, but Ohio State was idle. I believe Penn State was idle. So like I said, it just wasn't too many, especially like top ranked matchups. But nevertheless, it turned out to be a fantastic weekend of college football. So some storylines that we're going to cover in this video today. So we are going to cover the Clemson loss. All right, Clemson lost to Syracuse. Memphis had a great win. I know we don't usually hear too much about Memphis, but I think it's time. Also, I think that college football, the landscape is changing. We're seeing these top tier programs, they're coming down, and then we're seeing these programs that aren't really talked about. They are elevating. So it's been really fun to see. Memphis, the Memphis Tigers are 4-0, and they just beat Arkansas 32-31. They overcame, I believe, an 18-point deficit. So got to give credit to where credit is due. The Memphis Tigers are 4-0, defeating an SEC team 32-31. All right, and then we had Oklahoma at Auburn. We're definitely going to get into that. We have Vanderbilt at Georgia State. Vanderbilt at Georgia State. This game is interesting because, like I said, the lower tier programs are elevating. Now, Georgia State, of course, they're, an FBS 1 school. So, we're not really we're not looking too much into this game. But what we can take from this game, the Vanderbilt Commodores are 4-0. All right. And they put up 70. I don't really care who you're playing. If you can put up 70 points, your team is doing something right. You don't put up 70 points by accident. I don't care who you're playing. These are still Division I teams. All right. So let's, give credit. But I think it's worth noting the Vanderbilt Commodores. They are 4-0. All right, so I'm getting sidetracked a little bit. Let me keep up with the stories, what we're going to cover. We are also going to cover the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State beat Kent State, another lackluster opponent. I told you there weren't too many, strong headlines in terms of matchups, but teams really had the opportunity to show what they were made of this week, and a lot of teams took advantage of that. Florida State being one of them. They put up 66 points. They beat Kent State 66-10. All right, and then finally, another game that was pretty important was Miami versus Florida. I was going to say at Florida, but Miami was home. So Miami beat Florida for at least the second year in a row. They beat them 26-7. The Florida Gators, I really don't know what's going on with that program. DJ Lagway, he's not looking very great. Billy Napier, might be time for him to go. But on the contrary, like I said, Miami, this is the second year, at least the second year in a row that they beat Florida. And they're 4-0. So there's a lot to talk about. The new AP poll also dropped around Sunday afternoon. So, of course, we're going to get into that. But first, we just got to touch on these games a little bit. So let's just start with Clemson. Clemson lost to Syracuse 34-21. And a lot of headlines for this game after the fact was that Syracuse upset Clemson. Now, is it an upset when you look at Clemson's record and they're 1-3, And then you look at Syracuse's record after the game; they're 3-1. They also won by 13 points. So 2 possessions, almost 2 touchdowns. That's not really much of an. I mean, Clemson, of course, they are upset, but you know, I think it's time to start looking at Clemson a little bit differently. We do have to still hold them to the same standard. However, they clearly aren't what we thought they were going to be when the season first started. They came into the season, I believe their preseason rank was 5. And I went on record saying that, we can't take too much from the preseason rankings. But they do mean something, and it gives you something to look forward to. With Clemson, I really thought that Dabo was going to have a great year. I really thought that he was going to remind everyone, why he's, been so successful, why he's a 2-time national champion. But it's not looking like that. They might go 6-6. So Dabo, I don't know if you got to hit the transfer portal. It seems like this is coming down to culture with Clemson, right? It seems like, this has been brewing for a few seasons at least. This just lackluster of play has been brewing. And as a head coach, Dabo, you got to get on that. You got to change some things around in the culture. You might have to shake some things up. You got to look at recruiting. Who are you recruiting from South Carolina? You gotta change something. You gotta change something. Clemson is not looking good, and I don't even think it was an upset. I don't think it was an upset. It seems like Syracuse, they beat Clemson pretty handedly. So let's give Syracuse some credit. That was a great win for them, especially in the ACC and conference play. Next weekend, Clemson is taking on North Carolina. Now, this is going to be a battle. I don't even know. You definitely don't want to lose this game. This is going to be a battle to see who. I don't even know. Who's the worst coach? Who's the worst team? This is just the battle of 2 trash teams going at it. They're trash. Let's just call it like it is. And because they are trash, we're not going to spend too much time on those topics, on those teams. They don't deserve our time. On to the next one. Memphis took on Arkansas, and they won 32-31. Memphis is 4-0. Now, they overcame about an 18-point deficit, and this game was actually really good. Arkansas, it looked like they were going to win the game. They should win the game. Arkansas, they've got a lot more students than Memphis. They are an SEC team. You would just expect them to be more dominant. They're not the cream of the crop in the SEC, but, like all those Southerners, they think the SEC is just next to the NFL. And we're seeing that that's not really the case. And as I mentioned, Memphis won 32-31. That was a really great game. It was a comeback win. Let's see. Memphis's quarterback, Brandon Lewis, had 199 yards and a touchdown. Their wide receiver had 147 yards and a touchdown. They actually had, their running back had 147 yards and a touchdown, while their wide receiver had 100 yards and a touchdown. So it was a pretty good game. Look out for Memphis. They may be a playoff team. With the new format, we're seeing the extension. So can Memphis sneak in? We got to look into a team like Boise State, a team like SMU, just to see how Memphis compares to them. We're just using those 2 teams as an example because we know they made the playoffs last year. So can Memphis, be one of those tier teams and sneak into the playoffs? They are undefeated. So let's see. Memphis is looking pretty good. Look out. All right. Now, back to the SEC. Staying in the SEC. We had Oklahoma taking on the Auburn Tigers, and they beat them 24-17. This game was really interesting because, of course, Jackson Arnold, he is a former Sooner. So he's going up against his old team. right? He's playing on the road, so talk about a homecoming. But of course, he wanted to win this game. If nothing else, he wanted to win this game, and you can't blame him. I don't know why he ended up, leaving from Oklahoma. I know Oklahoma's quarterback is John Mateer. He is, a decent quarterback. He had 271 yards and a touchdown, while Jackson Arnold had 220 yards and a touchdown. Now, this game was interesting, of course, because, like I mentioned, Jackson Arnold's going against his former team. Both of these teams were undefeated, so Oklahoma remains undefeated at 4-0. And Auburn is, 3-1. They took on their first loss. So what does this mean? What does this mean overall for college football and for the SEC? For the SEC, I think it means that we might have to consider Oklahoma as a top tier competitor to perhaps win the conference this year. We were looking at Texas. They might be getting their groove back. But that was against Sam Houston, so it's still yet to be seen what we really can expect from Texas. Who else? Georgia, is always going to be in the mix. Gunnar Stockton, I don't think that he's like a great quarterback, but he's a winner. They pulled out a tough win against Tennessee last week, so that's really something to build on. And like I said, that's of course putting themselves in a great space in the standings. So for the SEC, I think we can, like I said, include Oklahoma, Georgia, possibly Alabama. They might be getting their groove back. Auburn, I think Auburn will be all right. But it's yet to be seen. It's yet to be known, of course, who's going to run away with the SEC. I don't think any team looks like they are running away. 1 week it might be, Georgia. The next week it might be Oklahoma. Then it might be Texas, might be Alabama. So we'll just wait and see. And because Ohio State and Penn State were idle, we are touching on a lot more games from the SEC. So don't get too full of yourself, SEC fans. You just happen to have a really great week, so credit where credit is due. But next week the Buckeyes will be playing. So get ready for that. But let's get back to these headlines. So, like I said, we are in a new era of college football, I believe. Obviously, with the CFP expansion, but also, of course, with the NIL. But also, we're just seeing teams ascend, and we're also seeing other teams descend. One of those teams that are ascending are the Vanderbilt Commodores. They are 4-0, and they put up 70. Like, let's clap it up. I know they played Georgia State. Georgia State probably has like 5,000 students, if that. But, they put up a 70 ball. So I got to give it to him. Diego Pavia is a dog, all right? He showed us what he could do last year at Alabama. And he's showing us this year what he could do again. He was 18 of 24, 245 yards, and a touchdown. And get this, he also had 9 carries and 86 yards for a touchdown. So Diego Pavia, my boy, keep doing what you're doing. Keep balling. Keep putting teams on notice. Vandy is 4-0. And it seems like we are ages from when Nick Saban said Vanderbilt is the easiest place to play in the SEC. Now, this was not an interconference game. However, they played really well, and we have to give credit where credit is due. So, congratulations, Vanderbilt. You are 4-0. All right, so the next game, Florida State. They are 3-0. They put up 66 against Kent State. So this is a sort of similar boat as Vanderbilt. As I was just speaking the praises of Vanderbilt. Not a tough opponent. Not anything to brag home about. But the execution and the effort cannot go unnoticed. Anytime you put up over 40, over 50, over 60, like it's just salute to you. So Florida State, you are trending upwards. I like what I'm seeing from Florida State. And last but not least, the Miami Hurricanes. They are 4-0, and they just beat the Florida Gators 26-7. Florida, like I said, I don't really know what's going on. Billy Napier, DJ Lagway, you guys got to get it together. DJ Lagway had 61 yards through the air. Their leading rusher had 46 yards on the ground, and their leading receiver had 22 yards. 22 yards receiving. Like, this is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and it cannot happen if you're the coach of the Florida Gators. Now, switching gears to the Miami Hurricanes, they are trending upwards. There was a lot of question marks surrounding them coming into this season because, we just didn't know what was going to happen to them. Cam Ward went to the NFL. They got Carson Beck as a transfer, and Carson Beck is balling. Carson Beck, he's winning, I should say. He's winning. I'm looking at his stats right here. He was 17 of 30, 160 yards, and an interception. But I think the difference in this game was the running game and the defense. The Mark Fletcher, the Hurricanes running back, had 24 carries for 116 yards and a touchdown. And of course, the Hurricanes defense held the Gators to only 7 points. So Miami's looking really good. And this is the perfect segue into the AP poll that just dropped. Because can you believe Miami is ranked the second team in the nation behind the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes? So Miami is number 2. And when I first read that, I was a little bit taken back. They are good, of course, but to see them at number 2, that's just insane. We see how their season ended last year. They barely missed the playoffs. They started so dominant and then they declined. So, are they going to follow the same path that they were in last year, or do we think they can turn it around? So Miami is ranked number 2. Like I said, Ohio State and Penn State were idle. Ohio State remains at number 1. Penn State falls to number 3. The LSU Tigers are number 4. Their previous ranking was number 3. They are 4-0. And this past week, they defeated Southeastern Louisiana 56-10. I guess we got to, like I said, I tip my hat to Vandy. I tip my hat to Florida State. Also got to tip my hat to LSU. They put up 50. All right, Georgia ranked number 5. They were idle. All right, next Saturday, Georgia's taking on Alabama, 7:30. So night game. That's going to be a good one. The Oregon Ducks are ranked number 6. Oregon looks pretty good. They might have a Heisman, quarterback. They've been putting up points. They just defeated Oregon State 41-7. So Oregon is looking pretty good. I'm not mad at this top 10 at all. It's really shaping up. Every week it's shaping up to really give us an inclination on what we can expect from teams and who we can expect to be in the playoffs. All these teams that I just mentioned, 1 through 6, I think 1 through 6 will be in the playoffs. We got Oklahoma at number 7. They jumped up 4 spots after beating Auburn 24-7. Florida State is number 8. All right. Next week, Florida State is at Virginia. So big game coming up for Florida State. Texas A&M. They were idle, all right, but they're still undefeated. And next week, they have Auburn. Texas A&M is ranked number 9. And rounding out the top 10, we got the Texas Longhorns. They defeated Sam Houston 55-0. Clap it up. Clap it up. Clap it up. That was their largest margin of victory since 2021. All right, next week, Texas has Florida, so they can just chalk another W in that column. Arch might be getting his swagger back. Texas might be onto something. Let's see how they look at Florida, okay? Arch, if they come out and struggle with Florida, or if they come out and only beat Florida by 1 possession, we're gonna be back to saying, that Arch is kind of trash and Texas isn't that good. They have a talented team. Don't get me wrong, but when your quarterback is like the Achilles heel of your team, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. So let's see what they look like next week at Florida. Like I said, this was an exciting week of college football. I definitely enjoyed all the games. My biggest takeaways from this week was, you know, I guess you could throw Clemson in there. It's just noteworthy that they're 1-3. That's the only thing that makes that game noteworthy, because this is the worst start of Dabo's career. But to get on to the positive side of things, Memphis had a really great win. Oklahoma had a really great win. Florida State, Vanderbilt, Miami. These teams had some really good wins. Even Notre Dame. Before we hop off, let's just take a look at Notre Dame's last game. Notre Dame won 56-30. So, congrats. Hats off to Notre Dame. They beat Purdue 56-30. They're the 22 ranked team in the nation. Although they have a losing record, they got a bad hand of cards dealt to them to start the season. But there are no moral victories. There's no crying. You get it how you live. So that was this week of college football. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I'll see you next time.